All right, Scott. I had a trip north this morning and drove about an hour and a half from the house and realized that I could use this time, considering I have had a hard time finding time, to recount what I can. So I guess this will be my attempt at least the origin of this breakdown, breakthrough, whatever you want to call it. A little history. I would say, struggled most of my life with depression and numbness. Found myself, an example was when I was younger and my grandfather died. I think I might have been 9 years old at the time. And I remember being at the funeral and literally looking around at people's reactions and thinking in my head, oh, I guess I should be sad, and pretended to cry. I literally faked and acted as if I was sad and crying. So either a disconnect way back and a tendency to act in a lot of situations and find myself even now acting a lot like what is acceptable or what the situation might call for. Sorry. When I got into church for the first time, it was a United Pentecostal church. The long hair, no dresses, no makeup for women, no TV. You either believe what they believe or you're going to hell. I mean, down to if you don't tithe, you're going to hell. If you aren't baptized in a specific way, in a specific formula, with specific words being said over you, you're going to hell. They do definitely have a different view of the Godhead that obviously is going to be an issue for me with a lot of people, because I don't necessarily subscribe to the view of the Trinity and have since departed from the view that I was taught in that church as well. That my experiences, my understanding, the revelations I've had lead me that both are inaccurate or fall short of a comprehensive or understandable explanation for things. So that's just a qualifier. I'm just letting you know. I don't wish to discuss that. I'm not going to be convinced of anything by anyone in that regard, because I have too many personal experiences and revelations that I've already gone down the whole argument path, down to the soul and spirit connection, and it frustrates me when I get into a debate with somebody or try and ask questions, because it just becomes a dogmatic, well, this is the phrase I was taught and so I'm repeating it, yet they can't explain it. So that's part of my frustration in life in general, is if you can't explain something to me in a way that can be understood, why would I agree or believe you? Or why would you dismiss my viewpoint if you can't actually disagree or counter it or argue it logically? Sidetrack, sorry. So this church started with a home Bible study. I was married at the time. Actually, I was not married at the time, but living with my fiance. And she had been raised in the Pentecostal church and decided that she wanted to go back to church. So she contacted the local congregation, the pastor and his wife, gave us a home Bible study, and I had never given much thought to God in my entire life. I was not raised as a Christian. We went to church on holidays and occasional Sundays. I don't remember anything about it. So to me, it was new. At that point in my life, I understood what life was. I had it figured out. The world's corrupt. Everything's rigged. It's a game. And you just do what you can to survive. And finally, after this Bible study, it was a short Bible study, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, that went through a specified, their doctrine, so to speak. But the study in and of itself was like, that makes sense. That sounds logical. I think I understand that. Yeah, I agree. And they were logical, like, okay, let's see where this goes. And I began reading the Bible. We began to going to church there. And we had agreed that we would not sleep with each other until we got married. But he was not going to baptize me until we did get married. In 99. So October of 99, we got married privately, and I was baptized. New Year's Day that year, we got married. Approximately a year later in October, let's back it up maybe a month, constantly seeking for the infilling of the Holy Ghost, of the Holy Spirit, because that was part of my salvation. If I was not filled with the Holy Spirit, as evidenced with speaking in tongues, I was not saved. I believed that until I kept reading, and I had an experience one night where I'm specifically praying, please God, fill me with the Holy Ghost. Please God, fill me with the Holy Ghost. And I began to feel something, and I'm like, what is happening? And it was like a tingling all over my body. And I actually got kind of scared. And I remember thinking, this is real. This is happening. Like your first moment where it's like, there is something to this. And I remember 3 to 4 days after that, I just felt clean. Like my spirit was clean, and like the bark had been stripped off of my spirit, and there was flesh there now. And my spirit could breathe and contact the outside world again. I think that's what it means, like calloused or hardened like stone. Our hearts is, over the course of our lifetime, they develop a crust and become like dry ground, and they can't grow anything. And I think we're actually cut off from God because our spirit is so hardened or turned off, dead, that God can't move us, because that's how he moves us. So we're left to internal guidance, instruction from the outside world, and what we choose to adopt and the decisions we make. We're like on our own. We don't have that connection anymore. I believe that connection was reestablished that night. I told my pastor about it, and he said, no, that's just a blessing. And immediately thought that sounded really weak as an argument. It didn't make sense to me. But I hadn't spoken in tongues, therefore to the church, I had not been filled. And I had been continually seeking in church this infilling. Sorry about the quotes. Even to the point where I was faking that at times. And the church believed I was honestly seeking, and I was doing it to please them. I wasn't. Some really messed up thinking and personality defects going on that I really wasn't aware of. Then again, who is? And eventually I did have an encounter at the church where I did begin speaking in tongues and felt very elated and very joyful, exuberant. So therefore now I was accepted because I had the sign. I do think there's something to that experience, but I don't know if it's necessarily the same thing as being cleansed. So that was in October of 2000. from that point on, I started wanting to get interested in, hey, what's this spiritual warfare stuff? Should we be doing something differently? Because the church believed in spiritual things. I had seen manifestations of things, at least people dancing and running around the church, and you could see something was acting upon them. So I started getting excited about that. And actually earlier in the year, I want to say it was probably January, February, I had overheard my pastor talk about one of the associate pastors that he had been praying and fasting. And pastor was really proud of me because I didn't even ask him to do that. He did it all on his own. So being that I was so hungry for praise and acceptance from a father figure or somebody in a leadership role that, I can do that and it'll please my pastor. So I began fasting. And it got to the point where I was going sometimes 7 to 10 days without eating. If I didn't do a long fast like that, I was periodically, maybe once or twice a week, not eating. I think the longest I went was like 11 or 12 days. I did a 24-hour without water or food at all. And I was just doing this because it was like, well, where is this going to go? What is it doing? Obviously, I was losing weight, but not understanding that the more I was doing this, the stronger my spirit was becoming, and I was starting to enter into spiritual realms that I did not know I was entering into. I had no idea. Clueless. I thought I was just fasting and that did something to please God, and I lost weight, so I felt good about it. So after the October experience, I noticed things started changing rapidly in my perception. I started becoming more spiritually minded in the sense that I was always thinking there was a spiritual causation for everything, or trying to attribute it to a demon or that's God, and over spiritualizing things to the point where really not dealing with basic reality anymore. It was like everything was kind of a fantasy world. And as the year progressed, it seemed to get worse and worse to where I felt like I was feeling things. I was monitoring my thoughts because I wanted to make sure that my thoughts were me, and realizing that sometimes your thoughts aren't you, or they're not parts of you that you really want to listen to. And I don't exactly know what one of the final straws was, but it seemed like, I think January or February of that year, it got really bad for about 2 to 3 weeks, to where I was definitely in and out of a trance a lot. And what finally, I think, triggered I'm not in a good place is that there was an earthquake. And 2 weeks up to that, I just felt this impending sense of something is going to happen very badly. End of the world, that whole feeling of this is it, this is the end of the world. And I remember kneeling at my wife in the bed, telling her about all these, spiritual thoughts and ideas, and seeming more and more disjointed and not in touch with reality. And then the earthquake struck. And I was like, see? It didn't faze me. It was like, I told you. And she was, of course, scared out of her mind. But that was like, okay, this is it. This is the end. And I started going into end time mode. It just not healthy. Some spiritual stuff, but also a lot of imagination and brokenness all coming together at the same time. I think I went to work that night and the next day, and it just kept getting worse and worse as far as the trance state, until finally I was just letting my attention go where it would, instead of, maybe we do this all the time, where our attention the seeker that we have just kind of seemed to go where it wanted to go rather than me directing it. That was a differentiation. I was like, at times, your attention can be separate from what you're wanting it to focus on. And it was almost like an automatic. I would yield and see where my attention went. Found out that could be manipulated. But there's times when you do yield and allow your senses to just go where they go because God's using you. But then there's times you tighten up and say, nope, don't look, don't touch. I don't remember the exact point when I was... All I know is that night I was walking in a trance around the mill that I worked in. I just left my workstation and started walking around, seeing where I was being led. And I ended up going to another mill, part of the same company, walking up the stairs to the office and walking in the office. And the guy's like, I'm thinking the whole time, God's leading me into something. God's leading me into something. And he's like, can I help you? I go, I think so. I think I'm here for a new job. Because I was thinking, God's just going to give me a new job. Just going to follow it and he's going to give me a new job. He goes, oh, you're a new hire? Yeah. Okay. And I sat down and, I'm spacing out. I'm looking at lights. And finally this guy sees, like, there's something really off with this guy. He makes a phone call and it got to the point where I was literally staring at the screensaver on the computer, and I think I said something to the effect of, I'm in charge now. And I looked up and my wife is there and my pastor is there and my boss is there and there's all these people around me looking at me, and she just says, Rob, and it's like, snap me out of it. And I'm like, oh crap, what's going on? What is happening? And went into an office and, my pastor was freaking out, of course, because he thinks he's going to get blamed for some of this. And he's like, are you still fasting? And I was like, yeah. He goes, you need to eat 3 square meals a day. And I was like, what the heck is a square meal? Thinking square instead of a round meal. I don't know. Just words started taking on different meanings for me. It's like the context became a little more fluid, and you could see how easily one word could be interpreted, unless you're just in that train of thought that you're always in, how words can be interpreted and oh, wait, that could mean this. And entire sentences could mean something different if you're not affixing the context that you're used to on it. You allow a different context to form and interpret. Side note. I think I went home. The next day it wasn't getting any better. It was getting worse. And my dad and my wife were just like, okay, we got to go. And took me to St. Peter's Hospital in Olympia, Washington. Went into the emergency room. And at this point in time, everything was so heightened and so spiritual. The sun, if I saw the light, it would make me feel better. And if the cloud came over the light, I would feel bad, like a darkness. I started noticing people's conversations would actually affect me. If they were speaking of something negative, I was in the waiting room. There's this lady and another lady talking about an accident, and oh yes, and he got hurt, and da-da-da. And I was listening to it, and I just felt this heaviness and darkness, and then I'd look at the light and feel a little bit better. And a guy came from an exam room or anything like that, I don't know. He had a cast on his arm. I felt and perceived like these strings come out from my heart and wrap around his arm, and feel this sense of compassion, and just blurted out, I have to help him. And I got up and went walking toward him. They pulled me back down in the seat, and it was like, everything was, you had to act on it. There was no thinking. Got up to the counter, shut the light off. I thought that was interesting. I was like, what in the heck? Why would she shut the light off? It could have been something just coincidental, but questionnaire, asking questions, checking me in. I don't remember if we met with... That was just an intake. We didn't really meet with anyone per se. Went into an emergency room waiting area where there's different, stalls that you would wait in. And I remember being in one, and I'm sitting down, and I look down and something's labeled occipitus or something like that. And I said, I can read that. And it was written in Greek, and I was like, I can read that. And back up. I remember specifically praying while all of this was going on, God, is it possible for me to intercede for the world? To stand in the gap? I think it happened. I think I did. Unknowingly. I have to make sure to recheck that, if that's not some kind of grandiose thinking. But I don't think it is. He talked about that in the Old Testament. Where's the repairer of the breach? Where's the one that stands in the gap? And I think people do that at times without even knowing it. That our world is so tenuous at times that he will use people that are willing to bear an unbearable load for a brief moment just to keep judgment from hitting us. This is... I think he's wanting me to go down this a little deeper. The idea of interceding for the world. Wow. However ambitious or attention-seeking or wanting to do something great for God, I ended up in that place. And I thought it was the end, and therefore I wanted to stand in the gap and keep the end from happening. Just take it for what I'm thinking. This is what I was thinking at the time. Yeah, there was a lot more that was going on. I forgot about that. I did start having thoughts that were menacing. I began conversing with the thoughts, thinking that I was speaking to God at times, even though at times it was. I experienced the ear of the learned. It is a term in Samuel. And some of the things that I was experiencing, I knew were God. Yet everybody around me was trying to say, no, it wasn't. Including my pastor. He came to the house one night because I needed somebody to talk to. This was before the hospital, I think. And he was acting bizarre. Just herky-jerky, and everything was matter of fact, and everything, no, that doesn't happen. No, God doesn't talk to people anymore. And I'm like, yes, he does. I was fighting this battle in my head with these voices, not audible, just thoughts. And I had gotten to the point where all of a sudden things turn and they become more menacing. And then I begin to get scared, realizing that whatever forces are speaking to me can speak through people to me, whether I know it's happening or not. They can affect me without me even knowing it, because they're speaking through people all the time. That affects you because you hear your spirit hears the words, and if it's something being told you as a command, your spirit obeys it because it thinks it's a higher power than you are. Like messing with your control panel, your equalizer. I'm trying to keep things on track here. So bottom line, at that point in time, I figured out, or I had thought, these things have me. And I thought it was aliens. And that I couldn't do anything because they could control people around me. They could make me feel things and sense things. I'm like, I'm done. If this is like some intergalactic or interdimensional beings, they're way more powerful than me. They've got me. And I remember specifically saying, okay, I'll serve you. Just let me love my wife. I was holding her as this went on. That was the condition that I said, just let me love my wife. And I remember being in bed, and the thought came into my head, well, wait, if you guys can do anything, then you can do something for me, right? Might as well make it worth your while. And I asked for some things that I shouldn't have. And then I felt something that I had not felt before. And I felt as if it were my heart were a scale. And it was bending and felt awful. And then it would come back up and right itself. I thought, what was that? And so I kept conversing. And then it would do it again. And it got worse and felt darker and more evil. And then it came back up, and it was just boom. The word temptation came into my mind. And in my mind, I yelled out Jesus in my mind. And the wall lit up red. And then went back to normal. And it was like, oh my gosh, that was a temptation. And part of the reason I bring that up is that it feels like at times I went through the end time test that every person is going to go through. It's just, I don't know how else to describe it. That the entire populace of the country, of the world, is going to go through this. And unless they have some knowledge of God, they're gonna fail it. And I don't know if that's the hour of temptation that's spoken of in the book of Revelation. Maybe not. Getting the sense that maybe not. So back to the hospital. In the waiting room, in the doctor's examination room, there was probably 7 or 8 little cubicles in this area. Again, I'm sitting, I see the Greek word. I said, I can read that. And then I looked at my wife and I said, I think this is my office. Office again takes on another meaning. At that point in time, I said, I think this is my office, talking about the physical space. Coming to realize later that that's my calling. This is the office I'm going to be sitting in as one of an emergency room doctor, so to speak. So I have my mom and my dad, my stepmom, my wife are with me. We ended up going into a larger room of some kind. And this is where things got really weird. As if the rest wasn't weird enough. I remember a couple of events. I was tested by the doctor, like neurologically. They run through a battery of tests to see if it's something neurological. Can you hold your hands out? You know, in my mind, I'm like, it's like a cross. Again, I am lucid in my thinking during all of this. Experiencing it, being oblivious, but at the same time being lucid enough to track and monitor everything and make my mind up about things. It doesn't make sense. Because I have 4 people in the room with me that are freaking out. I have doctors and nurses that are somewhat freaking out. I have in my mind that the end of the world is going to happen. And I don't know what's happening to me. There was a moment where the entire scene, because there was a man in the room with us, a Native American guy, and something about the scene in the room, suddenly it was like a memory. I've been here. I've seen this before. Whether in a dream, in a movie, the whole thing was like a deja vu. Not 5 seconds, but like 10 minutes. I mean, clear as day. Yeah, I'd like to make a phone call, were the words that I heard him say, and it was just like, I've been here. The phone was a red phone, and he makes a phone call, and I mean, the number, I need to make a phone call. I need number, da-da-da-da. And I'm like, should I be writing this down? Like, this is information that is just crazy high level type of thing. A phone number, names, the situation, stuff in the room. Maybe there was a sign somewhere. I don't know. Throughout the whole thing, the cleanliness and washing of my hands seemed to like come up a lot, and I started becoming kind of obsessive about washing my hands. And one of the signs in the room, make sure to wash your hands. I was like, oh, okay. Things took on a command rather than just, here's a suggestion. And I went to wash my hands, and again, this is in the middle of an examination room while I'm going through all of this. There's doctors and nurses around. There's a guy in the bed next to me that's writhing in pain. And I go to the sink and I turn on the water and I start washing my hands. And I'm like, whoa, what was that sensation? And I felt some like electric sensation in my hands. I didn't realize I had turned on the hot water. And this water was scalding. And I had my hands under it for a good 5 seconds. Didn't feel a thing. And then all of a sudden felt something, but it wasn't even pain. And my wife was like, Rob, that's burning. Oh, I didn't feel it. Eventually, I ended up wandering over. I don't know whether the doctors were occupied with my parents or what, but I go over to this guy at the bed and I said, what happened? And he has this massive scar. And he just looks at me and goes, exploratory. I was like, really? And then he looks over at the nurse. Hey, is he like a doctor? Are you like a doctor? And I kind of nodded like, yeah. That kind of went into the side, into the background, or he left. I don't know. I remember looking at the clock, and this was the first visual, I guess you could call, hallucination that I remember. And the minute hand was spinning so fast you could not see it. The hour hand was spinning so fast, like revolutions, like over and over. And I'm just like, I look at her and I look at my wife and go, do you see that? She's like, what? I go, the clock spinning like that? She's like, no. And the thought came and it goes, I am going to have to rethink reality. I don't have this figured out. I specifically remember thinking that. And then at one point, I don't know how, but I ended up looking my wife in the face very closely. And suddenly, like if you see pixels, started disappearing around her face. And I'll use the word veil lightly, but like there was a filter that was being turned off. And I began to see black and brown yellow color in her skin, and all like it was death. Like the pixels started fading and I started seeing what was there, and absolutely terrifying. It's like she's dead. And I had always had that something about the way she smelled. She was constantly sick, and I wondered, is this what she actually looks like spiritually? Is she this sick? And I mean, she looked like a corpse. Black under her eyes, awful greenish brown tones, and like just sick. That was horrifying. I tried to wipe that. I just kind of shook my head and wiped that away, and it seemed to go away. I'm trying to remember. It ended up being, at some point in time, I felt myself being pulled along a line. And in my head, I thought, I'm being pulled through time. And that I was going along the timeline into the future. And there was a moment where I said, I feel an earthquake. Continuing to move. And then I literally felt myself, and I said, the earth is falling. Like, just, I don't know how else to describe it. That was the thought. I said, the earth is falling. Like it's tilting on its axis or rolling on its axis. Kept moving forward, and then I started going up and feeling myself being pulled up. And I kept going up, and then I felt myself, the thought was, I'm in orbit, I'm above the earth. And I can't explain to you the feeling of altitude, the feeling of being above everything, above the world. Like when you're around people, there's a feeling, and just the energy of everyone's thought and life and behavior and the world's energy and everybody's anxiety. I sensed that. And when I got above, everything was quiet. I felt alone. I felt very exposed because I knew there was something looking at me and holding me. And I just felt like I was dangling above the earth underneath the presence of this being that is just obviously in a position of power, and I'm not. And the analogy I had at the time was that God had caught me. He was fishing, and he had caught me. And I felt myself being moved over, and then before I went all the way up, I remember passing through a barrier. A psychological barrier, if you will. As I was going up, I remember myself thinking, I'm not God. And then I would look down below the barrier and saying, I am God. I'm not God. I am God. And it became more rapid, the flip back and forth. And then I went through the barrier and it was like, I'm God. Not, please do not misunderstand me. Not that I had power or knew everything or was powerful in any way, shape, or form. I was one with God. I had a moment of unitive consciousness. And the analogy that I will use is that if you are in a fish tank your entire life, an aquarium, you think that's your environment. You feel the water, the dirtiness of the water, the smallness of the space, the temperature, it's just this fixed body of water that you're in, and you think it's who you are. And then if you were to all of a sudden be in the ocean in a moment, and you could feel the vastness of the ocean and the water and the difference, because it was very clean and very calm and peaceful. So I believe I left myself, my ego, left my structure and entered into God's spirit. Therefore thinking, well, this is what I am now, because my ego thinks I'm what I am surrounded by. Then I was lifted up high enough above the earth where I felt like I was being watched. And the whole time, I remember my reins being pulled. I remember my reins being tested. Literally wondering about, I'd have a thought that was a little bit on the negative side or carnal side. And I could feel that thought pulling like on my cheek. I'd bring it back to the front. I'd be, no, that's wrong. I'd feel it. No, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. Like I could feel this thing tugging as the thought would come in, trying to pull me that direction. And I would snap back to the front and say, no, that's wrong. He was trying the reins of my heart. How will he respond when I pull this way? And I was snapping back and saying, no, like either quote a scripture or what's right, So as I'm picked up above the earth and I'm being looked at, I felt like there was a host or a bunch of witnesses there as well. Like God is saying, look at the one I found. It's a keeper. And I remember in that moment saying something to the effect of, I don't want all those things. I just want to be at peace and my family to be blessed. That was my sincere request in that moment. And then I felt myself transition to the right. It's the only way I can describe it. I was moved to the right. And then I began to come back down again on the right side. Not sure the significance of that. And I remember passing back down through that barrier again. I'm God, I'm not God. I'm God, I'm not God. I'm God, I'm not God. I'm not God. You're God. Continue to descend. I'm missing something in between before I went up, I think. No. Started coming back down. I remembered before about the clock. I was given a choice in the room. They were trying to get me to take a pill. And I had a choice between a 3-day supply of Risperidol or a 7-day supply of some other drug. And the things like 3-day supply and all these other words that were, I can't explain to you how words took on more significance. Like everything was a metaphor, everything was a symbol, everything was layered with multiple meanings at the same time. And while you're talking about a 3-day supply of a medication, I'm thinking, okay, what is a 3-day supply? What is this medication going to do? What happens when I take this? And it became, well, the pharmacy's open, and somebody came in and said, I can't get this medication. I can only get the 3-day supply of Risperidol at the pharmacy. It's the only thing they have. And I said, go get that. And somebody went, my dad ran off to get the medication. And I don't remember if that was before I went up or while I was coming down. I think it was when I was coming down, but I also remember looking at the clock again, and I remember at one point the hands were just flipping directions and just going like crazy. But there was a time when I looked at it and it was stopped. And it was at 11:57 or 11:58 midnight, almost before midnight. And all I thought was, if it hits midnight, we're done. And I think that's when I asked for the pill. I know it's a little bit disjointed. It was 20-something years ago. So I think I took the pill at the height of all this, or right before it. Either way, when I started coming back down, I remember saying something to the effect, just bless my family. It was like one of the last thoughts I was having as I was that close. And I know at this point I had taken the pill. And I think I just came down more, and I came down more. And the entire experience seemed to just shrink and go down into my heart. And then it was over. Any hallucinations stopped. The experience just stopped. At least that much of it. It still wasn't back. They checked me into the psych ward, voluntary observation, 3 days. I think I went in there on a Friday. Or it was Thursday night, something like that. Probably 2 a.m. by the time I actually got in there and checked in. Went to sleep. Next 3 days, I was just manic. So excited. I just saw a vision. Da 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 da. This is where it started getting, not being able to tell when you're dealing with reality or normal consciousness and spiritual consciousness, because I was still in between those two. I remember there was this guy there. He was obnoxious, just excited, blah, 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 blah. And word got around real quick that I was talking about God and everything. And he goes, hey, I need to ask your advice about something. And I was like, okay. And he was talking about his girlfriend and how they had broken up and she's with another guy. And what should I do? And I said, do you love her? He said, yeah. Then you should marry her. You should go. I said, is this other guy anything? He says, no, not really. I said, and you should go marry her. And he just got all excited. He's like, you're right. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to invite you to my dad has a huge house, and I'm going to invite you to my wedding. And when you aren't fixing the now, in the moment context to it, what do you hear? My dad has a huge house, and I'm going to invite you to my wedding. But to those that are without, everything comes in parables. And seeing, they will see and not perceive. And hearing, they will hear and not understand. That was probably Yeshua talking to me through this kid. Testing me. What am I going to answer? Am I going to go into judgment? You shouldn't be with somebody without being married to them. Or am I going to give an honest answer? And I felt like my father was speaking to him. You should marry her. A lot of moments like that, where you'll hear the scripture come through somebody and it's like, that's a different meaning. And things take on a personal meaning to you. And God spoke to me personally through people a lot of times. He would announce when a person's speaking, it's almost like it's a personal message, quote. Whatever came out next, the person hearing it would hear it for them, but I would hear it for me from God. Two different contexts through the same message. So 2 days, I think, in the hospital, maybe 3. I was on fire. I was so pumped. I'm like, something happened. This is great. It's awesome. But then the questions start setting in. And once I got out and got back to regular life, I started crashing. And I went into a depression like I have never been in before. And like, did this even happen? Why do I feel this way? Why am I not excited? I'm going to go change the world now. And life began to fall apart rather rapidly after that. Got divorced in 2005. Wife left. Went down to Texas. And I was not back yet. 2003, I think, at the start of the Gulf War, I ended up in the hospital again. A lot of pretty much the same type of encounters where I know I had a auditory hallucination. I walked out my front door and clear as day I heard a sonar ping above me. I'm like, what was that? Like, as I'm looking up, it's coming from the sky. Like, why would a sonar? Oh, I must be subconscious. You start to notice the language that God will use to describe different aspects of the mind. Below, sub, well, cave, deep, ocean, all the different metaphors that he will use to talk about something that is subsurface in meaning. It has a deeper meaning. Started noticing that stuff in movies, children's movies, Disney's movies, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are they doing to kids' minds? Because they know the language. There's people that know the language and they're using it every day to program people. Little negative there, sorry. The second stay in the hospital was 11 days because there were no voluntary beds, and I agreed to check in involuntarily just so I could be close to home. It would seem that our mental health industry, the enemy has infiltrated with people. They can recognize when someone is going through something like this, and they try to derail it. And I found 2 people this time in the hospital that were definitely witches, working with the enemy, knowing something is happening to these people, but they derail any possibility that they would find their way through it and stick them on meds and in therapy, rather than trying to understand what they're going through. Not everybody's going through a spiritual transformation, but every mental disturbance is spiritual in nature, in my opinion. It's something happening with your spirit, and your mind is not able to understand it. Your understanding is unfruitful. I'm just going to go through 2 episodes in this situation. There was another guy there, younger kid, well, maybe a little younger than me, absolutely manic, couldn't really slow down at all, but he could tell he was going through something spiritual too, partially. And I remember when I first came into the area, he's all paranoid. He's like, oh my God, that guy's going to kill me. And I'm like, what? No. So he was a little paranoid. But one night, that same guy, there was an outdoor pavilion area where people would go and smoke. And I remember the first time somebody said, oh, that's where the smokers are. And I was like, what's a smoker? Like, hearing the spiritual, it's a metaphor for something. And I was like, what's a smoker? Just somebody that smokes. But I remember him out there talking with a lady named Joy. And I thought Joy was an angel. But Joy smoked. I thought that was a little odd. Anyway, Joy was out there conversing with Jeremy. And Jeremy was not Jeremy. She was talking to Jeremy's face. Jeremy's face was away from me, looking the other direction. She was looking back at Jeremy. And their conversation was nothing like 2 people that didn't know each other. Joy had anxiety. She was scared. She was smoking. And Jeremy is talking to her in a deeper voice, not scary, just like a fatherly voice. And the only thing I really remember him saying was, I need you to remember the contingency plan in Vegas. And she's shaking her head and nodding. And then their conversation ended as I was watching, and Jeremy walked up. And as I see his face, I see this like sparkling, glowing face rotate back from his face. There was another face that was there, speaking to Joy. And then it rotated around into the back. Like he was being used as a portal to talk to. The other incident in that time, they had put me in a room with another person. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night. And I just rolled over and I got up and I looked at the bed, the guy across from me. And there are 4 entities standing over his bed. one at the foot, I think 2 on the right, 2 on the left. And they're talking about him. They're talking about the guy in the bed. And all I could think of was like, one of them was discussing what the condition that the kid was suffering from was. Like they were training or learning. And I'm sitting up in my bed looking at this going like, what is going on? And the one standing next to the guy that seemed like he was in charge, these beings were glowing, not white. They looked like ultraviolet, white under an ultraviolet light. They were dressed in robes all the way down to the feet, sleeves all the way down that covered their hands. You couldn't see their hands or their bodies. There were hoods over their heads. Could not see their faces. They were very willowy, slender, but tall. And one of them in the bed looks over and sees that I'm awake. And I mean, you talk about a moment. They just went whoosh, and all of them looked like they flew out the door, like light speed. And then the door slammed, and an alarm went off. And in the psych facility, inpatient psych ward, whatever, they of course have a panic button where they lock everybody down if they have to. The doors close automatically and lock, and the alarm goes off. And after they left and the alarm went off, I was like, why is there an alarm going off? And I remember all of a sudden then these doubts started. You didn't really see anything. You imagined it. I was like, I know what I saw. And I laid back down and went to bed. Next morning, didn't hear anything about anyone talking about an alarm or door slamming or anything like that. And I took 2 conclusions from that. One, why did they have to use the door? If these are some kind of ethereal beings, why do they have to use a door? A doorway? And what was the other thing I was thinking? Oh, that may be going on around us at all times. And I think the difference was maybe I had sped up in time. As I experienced once before, like I was working at the mill and suddenly I turned around and I saw everybody moving as if they were fast forwarding. Kind of a, what in the world? But they're not fast forwarding. I had slowed down or retarded in time. My perception of time had slowed down to the point where everything looked like, they probably just saw me look like I was just standing there looking. To me, I was moving in normal time, but everybody else was moving in fast motion. So my thought was that I had been brought up to speed and had matched their time. Therefore, I could see them. And as they began to leave, I began to slow down, and I perceived what looked like they sped up and left. But I was actually slowing down. I get brought up for a moment, see it, and then slow down, but enough to get a glimpse of their time and what their perception of time is. That possibly they move at such a speed, it's relative for them, but to us, it's invisible. I have seen in a church service one time, I feel like I'm being checked. Not time. So let's leave it at that for now, I guess. I do not I'm just going to reiterate what I think God told me, was that there's a method to his madness. That spiritual people, I am not claiming to be one, Scott. I wanted to, because I thought it'd be neat to be like a prophet, to see things. It's not what I thought it was. It's terrifying. It's very uneasing. It's hard to incorporate. It's even more difficult to operate and then come back. But I think that's kind of what happens, is a person is drawn in, changes are made, things are experienced, then you go back out and you have to incorporate it because it's overwhelming. It's disorienting. It's catastrophically paradigm shifting, where things just don't fit anymore. Your personality gets distorted. Probably wasn't that well to begin with, from a mental health standpoint. And when I went through this, obviously things were broken. But then things were built too. And so personality-wise, there's a lot of flaws. There's behaviors and mannerisms and attitudes that are absolutely wrong. But what are you supposed to do? I haven't learned to rewire myself yet. All I can do is wait. I don't want to stifle that process. I don't want to try and alter my own behavior because it's unpleasant for other people. But I have to get along in the world too. And I have a wife, and I have a family, and I have work, and I have to get along with people and relate to people. And it's difficult because your mind is thinking about what's acting through that person right now. You begin to see insight into what's holding them back, or where their minds aren't working right. I've definitely gotten better at incorporation, but there's still something that has to break through and something that has to die. I'm not afraid of that anymore. At least I don't want to make it like Peter. I'd go to death for you, Lord. I'd die for you. No, he didn't. He denied him 3 times. I don't know how I'll behave. I would rather admit that I'm scared and unsure than to say, I'm confident I'm going to go through this, and then find out, no, I'm terrified. One last thing. And this has been coming back to me the last couple weeks. I had an experience in bed one time. I'm laying in bed. This is after my wife left. This is while I'm alone. And there were a lot of scary things and weird experiences that happened to me times of night when I was alone. I was laying in bed, and suddenly I felt something move its way from my feet up over me. And it was, all I can describe it as was terror. And it began to envelop me. And you know how when you're scared, you think you can kind of, I'm scared, but I'm okay. Try and pull back inside yourself and gather yourself together despite the fear. I couldn't do that. I tried. And it just became like being crashed over by a gigantic wave. And there was no escaping it. There was no minimizing or gathering yourself in the midst of it. It was overwhelming terror. And it's interesting, the last couple times I've thought about it, there's been this, it wasn't that bad. Oh, no, it wasn't the fear of the Lord. And I think it was. And I think that's something I needed to help me understand what the fear of the Lord is. And even now I can sense something in me trying to say, oh, it's not that big a deal. I don't know why, whether that's my flesh or the enemy or what. Trying to minimize what I felt that night. And it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. But the fear of the Lord is also the beginning of wisdom. So I think I'll stop there for now. That's an hour and 10 minutes you have to watch. Hope I didn't bore you. I'll ask that you pray about everything you heard. Guarantee you there's some of the enemy in there. It's almost a given, I think. I don't listen to people. Oh, they're a Christian, they must be safe to talk to. No. Enemy talks through preachers, people of faith all the time. It's just been my experience. He uses me, he uses other people. We're not immune. You don't suddenly have a you can't touch me. Till we're on the other side, you got to guard. You got to be vigilant. You have to be discerning. You have to be mindful. You have to not give place to the enemy. So my theology is vastly different from when I became a Christian. It was a right-wing zealot to I don't know what the truth is. Because there's too much in here that doesn't make sense. There's too much that's being preached that doesn't make sense. And I don't see the fruit in the world that Christian ministry is supposed to be producing. So we're not doing something right. Or we're not operating in truth. Or we're missing the mark. Or not hearing from God. Or hearing too much from people that aren't God. And I want to be accurate. I want to be walking in truth. And I want to make sure that what I'm saying is true to people. And I'm okay to being corrected. I'm okay to being questioned. But you better have a good debate. Not a, well, this is what the scripture says. Well, this is what the church fathers taught us. No. I started from ground. And I'll let God build my belief. Rather than, here's your belief. Good luck finding out what it means and how you got there, because you didn't learn anything. You were just handed a bunch of answers and you can't explain it. Oh, E equals MC squared. I know what that means. Really? Write it out. Write the formula out. Well, I can't do that. Then you don't know what it means. Pet peeve. Show your work. You better be able to build a house if you say you're a carpenter. Otherwise, you're just saying stuff. Well, God is blank, 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 blank. Really? That's all it is? He's just blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of frustration, Scott. I thank you for listening. Appreciate that you reached out to me. I don't think either one of us has to be 100% right about everything, but I'm hoping that God will work through you and maybe work through me too to help you if you need help. We all do. But I am curious to find out how you managed to come up with the language that you came up with in your sales pitch, and where you were learning this stuff, because this is not typical Christianity stuff you're looking at, in my opinion. It is. It's actual Christianity. That was one thing I remember during the hospital, during the bad event. I remember looking around and saying, I need a Christian psychiatrist. someone handed me a phone book. And I kept looking through. There was no such thing. They don't exist. And the guy I was counseling with, the pastor, pastoral counselor, I remember telling him that. And he looked at me and says, maybe you'll be the first. We're so dumb. We know so little. And I feel like it's killing us. And people perish for lack of knowledge. Where there is no vision, the people perish. All right. Let me know what you think. I'll get back to you. Love you.